One game in. We are exactly one game in, and Canada's already lost at this tournament. You want to know how I feel? You want me to tell you the truth? I'll tell you how I feel. I'm gonna lose it! Gold medal! Let's go! Back down the fly, just here recapping, predicting the World Junior Championship, U18 Women's World, the Men's World Championship, Women's World Championship, U18 Men's World Championship. What is happening? It is by far one of the dumbest things I have ever seen. Prepare to die. Figured it was better safe than sorry. Scores! Nathan McKinnon! Scores for Canada. Your home for international hockey. This is On the Fly. Hello everyone, welcome back to On the Fly. Today we're recapping day one of the Men's Under-18 World Championships happening in Bratislava and Trenčín, Slovakia. So we'll hop into today starting with the scores from today's game, starting with the opening game of the day between Sweden and Germany. Sweden to take this one by a score of 7-2, and this was a game that we look at it for the Swedes coming in, expectations on them. We were going to see whether or not they're going to be able to live up to that hype. A team well known for their offense, especially with the players they have at this tournament, and they really didn't disappoint in this game. We could see just really how skilled they were on the ice. A team in Germany that isn't necessarily as strong as they were from years past. Once again, a big win by the Swedes today to be able to kind of take control of this German team, especially early on in the game, where once you can kind of take out a team like Germany and remove any hope they have, then all of a sudden you start to see goals start to go in droves, and they end up scoring 7 straight goals. The Germans get too late, but in the end, the Swedes pull out a huge win here by a score of 7-2, a big 3 points in the standings for them. Then we will move on to the second game of the day, where we'll have Finland beating Norway by a score of 6-1. Another game where I'd say very similarly to the game against the Swedes, you saw with this Finnish team, it took them a little bit to kind of find their groove, but in the end, we see the Finns take a big win in this game as well, winning 6-1 over Norway. For Norway, it wasn't a terrible game for them. They got some good goaltending in net, something that they're definitely going to need going forward in this tournament. But at the same time, part of the issue, especially with a team like Norway, when you're playing a team as good as the Finns are, you kind of fall behind the pace. And especially with a team like the Finns, who, actually win the games they're supposed to, unlike somebody, you are going to struggle a little bit that much more against them. And so credit to the Finns today for playing a full 60 minutes, sticking with it, especially when things got tough. They end up pulling out the win, a 6-1 win at that over Norway. Then to the third game of the day, and this was one that I would say kind of snuck in the headlines a little bit today, especially after this last game of the day, which we'll, of course we'll get to in just a little bit. But the third game of the day, we have the Czechs beating the US 3-2 in overtime. In really what was a tremendous game by this Czech team, playing the exact way they needed to be able to beat a better team. Frankly, the US is just a better team than the Czechs are, but they played the near perfect game today, right? And they were able to hold the US within range just long enough. The US starts to hold their stick a little bit tighter. The pressure starts to mount, and we end up seeing this Czech team kind of play their best game of hockey we've seen in probably quite a while, especially at this tournament where it's been a little bit more of that kind of tough road these last few years for them. But credit to this Czech team, right? They won arguably one of the most important games for them at this tournament, because now it sets them up for a prime opportunity. If they can go out and beat the Swedes, they will more or less, barring any kind of crazy upsets on the bottom half of the group here, or at least where they should be, they will lock up the top spot, get a very easy path into the eventual semis and gold medal game if they can get to that stage. Their quarterfinal matchup should be fairly easy if they can take that top spot. And so with this win today for the Czechs, it sets them up extremely well going forward in this tournament. They're a team now to watch. We'll see whether or not they are going to be able to kind of pull off that one last big upset to secure them the top spot in Group B. If they can do that, look out, because they will be kind of scot-free on the way to likely almost a gold medal game, if not kind of that semifinals where they might run into a little bit more of that tough opponent. But for the Czechs, a big win for them today, a 3-2 overtime win over a good US team. Didn't play terribly great, but still, I'd say the Czechs really did beat them today. It wasn't necessarily the U.S. playing down to the Czechs. The U.S. played a decent game, but the Czechs, just the better team in today's game, taking this one by a score of 3-2 in overtime. And then the game that I know all of you are here to watch and listen to for, and the game against the Slovaks. Canada loses to Slovakia 2-1. The first time at the U18 level that Canada has lost to the Slovak team. And yes, it wasn't a great game by Canada. They have struggled mightily over the last however many years it's been now. They just keep losing. It's hard to keep track. This tournament for Canada was one of the few tournaments coming in that I would say realistically you were expecting them to be the favorite for gold, if not to kind of not have any problems on the way to doing that. The World Juniors, every year it's been the Czechs. The Czechs have always been Canada's problem at that tournament. Latvia, who they play tomorrow, is in that tournament as well. Right? Every year there's a new team at the World Juniors who come up and kind of surprise. And it tends to be against Canada because Canada just sucks. And we're losing the sport of hockey, but that's a side point. We made it a podcast topic a while back, besides the point. Coming into this tournament, once again, the last hope for a gold medal. The Men's World Championship team is slowly but surely being released out. Likely not going to win gold there, especially with how good that Finnish team looks. It's not looking great. The Women's World Championship, Canada is struggling mightily. They might not even be the silver medalist in a year when, of course, they go in November. That's going to be an extremely disappointing tournament to watch. I have no doubt of that. We're coming off the Olympic Games where Canada just lost to the U.S. twice in the men's and the women's gold medal games. This is the one tournament that Canada still had a chance in. Coming into this tournament, you looked up and down the roster and you said, yes, this is the team that's going to do it. They have arguably the best roster at this tournament. The Swedes are going to make their argument, but I will still stand by the fact that Canada still and does still have the best roster coming into this tournament. But at the end of the day, if you play as individuals, you will never win a hockey game. And it's been that way since the very start of this game, and it continued throughout the entire game. It's the fact that they will not hit the net. They're looking for top corner. They're looking for highlight goals. And it's the same issue time after time after time at these tournaments. And really, right, at what point does it change? And once again, for Canada, a very disappointing end to this game. They didn't play all that well. They were able to keep up pace-wise, but at the same time, no changes to tactics, bogged down in the Slovak system, and continuously taking bad penalties that end up costing you games. It doesn't just end with the U18 level. That's the one thing I want to make very clear, is it's not just a U18 level thing. Not just this game. It's been happening at every level of this Canadian national program, across the women's side, across the men's side. It's just been a disaster. And at some point, something needs to change. And I don't know what that big change is. I don't know whether it's a revolutionary different kind of tactic shift away from the NHL game. I don't know what it is. But whatever it is right now that they're trying to put out on the ice at the World Juniors, at the Men's World Championships, although we'll kind of excuse the Men's World Championships because that tournament, you tend not to see the best Canadian players. Side point. Men's Olympic Games, Women's Olympic Games, it becomes the issue. Women's U18s as well, they just lost to the U.S., although that tournament has been fairly successful for Canada as well. The truth of the matter is that Canada is not playing well as of this current moment. They need something to change in a really bad way. Is this the spark that gets them going? I would very well hope so. There does still exist the possibility that Canada finds themselves into the top spot of this group. Very likely, I will add as well, that considering the fact that they only lost by a goal today, if they go out and win against the Finns, if the Finns end up beating the Slovaks, which, once again, should still happen at this tournament, but you don't know anymore because Canada continues to put forth bad performances, they can still lock up the top spot in the group, and it will act like nothing ever happened. I don't know anymore. I truly don't. Credit to the Slovaks on a big win today. They played really well, played the exact game they needed to again against a Canadian team that continuously just plays for themselves. It's really easy to shut down teams who will try and put it top corner every single time instead of looking for rebound chances because, once again, the Canadians don't change their tactics. They do the same thing every single time because it gives them the highlight reel goals that'll end up on their NHL draft headlines. Once again, I'm not sure where they go from here. I think at the end of the day, you need to go back to the drawing board, figure out what's next for this team, because right now it's not working. Will they figure it out? Who knows? And that's the beautiful part about this sport, is with Canada especially, you never really know. But once again, I do want to give full credit to the Slovaks. We spent a lot of time in the early parts of this tournament, our previews, which we've done all 10 previews for this tournament, all 10 team previews, all our full tournament preview, and our prediction video, where we said in every single instance there, the Slovaks are a team who are very overrated coming into this tournament. I will own that. I have said that multiple times. It's well documented, and I've already been looking at the comments as they've been rolling in from those past videos, reminding me what I said. And yes, I did say it. And I hope you do that as well on this video, because it helps get it out to more people, which obviously makes more people see the sad Canada fan honk his nose. We'll see what's next for the Slovak team, because right now, if they can keep doing what they're doing, they are on path to the gold medal at this year's tournament. Being that top spot is one of the best things that could have happened to this team. And really, they're going to likely end up having to go through the Finns, Canada, in that semifinal as the way it looks right now. Yes, the US just went to overtime, but assuming the Swedes take that top spot, you're likely going to see that second and third place spot be either the Slovaks now or the Finns or Canada if they can find their way back in. And so it's going to be a really interesting next couple days to see how well the Slovak team can do, because as of this current moment, assuming they end up winning the games they're supposed to, right? As far as those power rankings went, the Slovaks were always going to be kind of favored against teams like Latvia, teams like Norway. So that's another 2 wins that I don't want to say are guaranteed, but definitely trending in the right direction. If they go out and beat the Finns, they find themselves in a very good spot to end up taking the top of the group in Group A, then leading themselves on to the promised land at this tournament on home ice. You never discredit what home ice can do. But for the Slovak team today, a huge win for them. A big congrats, their first ever win at the U18 program over Canada. And I don't know what more to say about this game. So we will shift over to the news, where we'll start here with the Germans. They're going to have to buckle up at this tournament. It is always and always will, kind of has been, going to be a tough sled for them. But you're going to go into the one game that matters for them tomorrow against the Danes. The Danes, once kind of a reminder, if you didn't watch our tournament preview, the winner of this game will likely avoid the relegation spot, barring any kind of crazy activity as far as upsets go. The Danes and the Germans, 2 teams very much at the bottom of Group B, where you'll see the Czechs, the US, and the Swedes as well. 3 teams that should be dominating both Germany and Denmark. The loser of that game very likely gets sent to that relegation game, where they'll play the last spot in Group A, which at this point in time could be Canada, so it very well could be a death sentence down to the Division 1A tournament for next year. And so for Germany, they got to buckle up. It's going to be a huge game for them tomorrow, and we'll see whether or not they can get the job done there. Then on to Sweden with think versus do. And for the Swedes, you come into these games against weaker opponents, and the question always remains, well, are you actually going to get the job done? We learned today that that's not always the case. And I think more than anything else, for a team like Sweden, being heavily favored as much as they are, these games tend to be a little bit more tough to wake up for. We saw them play an exceptional game today, a big win for them in this one, picking up a 7-2 win over Germany. Then we'll move on to the Finns, where they were dominant today, and a really impressive win for them there. We'll see whether or not they can continue that success through the rest of this tournament. Then to Norway, they are losing hope. And as much as we just spent quite a while talking about Canada and kind of how Canadians are starting to lose hope at this tournament, for Norway, all of a sudden their game against Latvia becomes ever so much more important, because they're no longer assuming the Slovaks don't have some kind of crazy turnaround at this tournament and kind of play to the expectation level a little bit lower than that at least. The Norwegians aren't going to be able to beat Slovakia. We saw what they did against Canada today. They're not going to be able to beat Canada. They're not going to be able to beat Finland, which I'd say was relatively expected walking into this tournament. But at the same time, you're going to see what Latvia can do tomorrow against Canada. Whoop-de-doo, we're going to see another game that, frankly, is probably going to end poorly for the Canadian team. But for Norway, we're going to see what they can do through the rest of this tournament. They have a huge game coming up against the Latvian team. If they're able to beat Latvia, they'll very likely end up avoiding the relegation spot at this year's tournament. However, if if they lose, very likely to be sent to that relegation game where they'll go up and play likely the loser of either Germany or Denmark in their game tomorrow. And so definitely something to keep an eye on there for Norway. Then to the U.S. with the stunner. And I think more than anything else, the U.S. walking into this tournament was always going to be an interesting matchup between those two. We highlighted that matchup as far as the game of the day went in our preview video. But at the same time, you look at it, especially for, these teams with the U.S., these are the games that you really need to win, especially as you look down the line in terms of tournament seeding. You want to end up as the top spot in the group. Gives you typically at least an easier matchup going in to that quarterfinal round. Now, very likely we're going to see them kind of in that second, third spot, barring any big upset over the Swedes. Likely going to end up in that third spot now with the Czechs knocking off the U.S. And so it's a very difficult path forward for this U.S. team where, as of this current moment, assuming this tournament kind of runs its course, you could see either Canada or the Finns or potentially the Slovaks, who have shown that they are a team to keep an eye out for at this tournament. They're going to get them in that quarterfinal. So for the U.S., a bit of a stunner today, losing to this Czech team. A really good Czech team, once again. We talked pretty intensively on them this year. Coming into the tournament, they're a solid program, but at the same time, not necessarily favored in their matchup against the U.S., which then leads us on to the Czechs with their now dark horses again, I guess you could say, at this tournament. We've talked about them as dark horses since the very start, kind of in that big five. I guess you have to include the Slovaks now into that big six at this tournament. And I think more than anything else for a team with the Czechs is they've earned their win at today's game, and they continue to play better and better as tournaments go onwards. And so if the starting point is being able to beat the U.S., you push that kind of win down the line into the quarterfinals, the semifinals, all of a sudden that momentum really helps your team. We'll see what they're going to be able to do against the Swedes coming up. It's a huge game for them there. They win that game, they are home free to the top spot over in Group B, which would be a huge opportunity for them. Definitely one to keep your eyes on there. For the Czechs today with the dark horses. For Slovakia, the news for them is that they did make history at this year's tournament, as obviously the first time they beat Canada at the men's under-18 World Championships. So a big congrats to them. I feel like we're right back to our Latvia World Junior days, where, of course, we did actually have a recap video for that. The Denmark one from last year at the men's World Championships. It's been sad, okay? It's been sad. Of course, as we lead into the next point with Canada with again, and again, right? And it's the same old storyline. It just hasn't changed since the last few years. The men's World Championships, they lose to Denmark in upset fashion, if you want to call it that. The most recent World Juniors, they lose to the Czechs in the semis. Of course, they go on to win the bronze medal, whoop-de-doo. After the last however many years it was, losing to the Czechs in the quarters, I guess it's an upgrade, but still a disappointing result there. The women's worlds, to be honest, the entire women's side has been a pretty much a disappointment these last few years as well. Their program has slowly but surely been dwindled away. They are in kind of a panic mode right now. We made a full podcast topic video as well on that Canadian team. Then this tournament, which was kind of Canada's last hope, they're looking for the three-peat at this year's tournament. Favored again coming in, a big loss to start the tournament. Reminds you very much of that World Junior campaign back in 25 on home ice for that team, where, of course, they lost to Latvia in the prelims, nearly lost to Germany in that tournament as well, even though they started the tournament with a big win over the Finns. From there, just loss after loss with the U.S. and then the Czechs in that quarterfinal. And so, again, history repeats itself as it so often does at these tournaments. Canada needs a wake-up call. We'll see whether or not they're going to be able to get it done. But as of this point in time, a very disappointing loss today, and one that, frankly, is going to be very tough to recover from. You want to try and avoid having to play the better teams at this tournament early on. If they play like they did today against the Slovaks, against the Czechs, against the U.S., against the Swedes, they're going to lose again at this tournament, not even make the semifinals, not even get a chance to play for a medal. And if that happens, you might as well come back here as well. So please do hit the subscribe button. We just hit 1,600 subscribers on YouTube, so thank you all for subscribing. But if you want to continue to honk the sad Canadian clown's nose, please do hit the subscribe button. But we will shift over, moving away from our sad Canada fan and trying to move onwards at this tournament into our standings. And we'll start here in Group A, where of course we will see the Slovaks in the top spot in Group A, tied with the Finns with 3 points each. Latvia hasn't played a game as of this current moment, and so they are in the third spot as far as Group A goes. And then in fourth spot and fifth spot is Canada and Norway. I'm going to put Canada in the relegation spot just because those two teams are technically tied, but because I'm not very happy with this Canadian team today, they're going to go in the relegation spot there. Group B, we'll see Sweden in the top spot with 3 points, Czechia in the second spot with 2 points with the overtime win today, the USA in the third spot with an overtime loss with 1 point, Denmark in the fourth spot. They haven't played a game yet, so there'll be that 0-point threshold right now. And then Germany in that last spot with 1 regulation loss. They will be in the last spot over in Group B. A reminder that both last place teams heading in at the end of the tournament, as far as the round robin goes, will be sent to the relegation game, where they'll play a 1-game playoff. The loser sent down to the Division 1A tournament, while the winner will stay up at this tournament for at least 1 more year. We'll see whether or not Canada is going to be that team this year, but not a whole lot to talk about with the standings as tiebreakers start to come into effect. We do need a few more games than just the first one to try and kind of play matchmaker. It's a great start for the Slovaks. They've earned a big win at this tournament, especially if they can keep it going with wins over Latvia and Norway. If they can do that, they're really home free at this tournament, but still definitely a game to keep an eye on there. Then we'll shift over to our schedule for tomorrow's games, starting with Germany taking on Denmark at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, Canada taking on Latvia. Oh, it's going to be a good one at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, Czechia and Sweden at 10 a.m. And then at 12 o'clock noon Eastern, we'll see Norway taking on Slovakia. As far as kind of what to expect in each one of these games, the opening one of the day, the battle for relegation, 2 teams fighting for really their tournament lives into next year. Look for fireworks in this one. This one will be relatively close. I think we had in our predictions the game going to overtime. Don't be surprised to see that happen there. Canada and Latvia is going to be another game where I'd say that'll be a very tight one as well, especially if Latvia can play their game. But if they can't, then all of a sudden you're going to see Canada really run up the score. And after today's result, I would very much hope so, to see Canada really run up the score in this game, knowing what's at stake, especially against a team like Latvia, who has that potential to pull off another big upset at this tournament. They're a team who we had beating the Slovaks in our prediction video. Don't be surprised to see Latvia knock off Canada again. They're a good team, right? And for Latvia, they're going to play well in this game as best as they can. If they can lock it up defensively, like we saw today with how the Slovaks did it, Canada's not going to have a chance in this game because they need to be able to outscore Latvia. If they play in a close defensive, tight checking game, they will likely lose this game. And so for Canada, it's all going to come down to how well they can break the game open. Look for this Canadian team to kind of play their best. If they don't come out hot, it's going to be a long game, and really they probably will lose if they don't come out flying out of the gates. But 8 a.m. Eastern between Canada and Latvia. Then Czechia taking on the Swedes. As far as what to expect in this game, you have the red-hot Czech team coming in on the back-to-back. Same thing with the Swedes. We'll see which one can come out on top as far as what to expect here. I'd say the Swedes should end up taking this game. The Swedes, kind of high-powered offense. We'll see if the Czechs are going to be able to shut that offense down. If they can, likely will be a little bit more of that success factor we'll see in that game. But if they can, if the Swedes start to get in that scoring battle, don't expect this Czech team to stick around for very long. Then the last game of the day between Norway and Slovakia. Norway, a little bit of a tough result for them today, losing to the Finns. The Slovaks coming in red hot. It could be a big win off against Canada. We'll see whether or not the Slovak team is going to be able to kind of earn their way through this tournament. This is a big game for them. It's a game that I'd say should be at least a little bit competitive. The Slovaks should take this one. As far as the matchups go, the only one that the Slovaks, of the kind of those bottom 3 teams at that point in the tournament, were expected to kind of be close with was that Latvian team. But now I'd say very realistically, after what we've seen today from the Slovaks, very likely we'll see them continue their success through the rest of the bottom two teams at this tournament. In Group A, on track to play the Finns, which all of a sudden could be a very interesting game. I still do expect the Finns to be able to beat the Slovaks, but at the same time, still an interesting one there. Those are your games for April 23rd. As far as your games of the day go, the opening game of the day, Denmark and Germany, a huge game for the bottom half of Group B. The winner very likely avoids the relegation game, which is huge, especially for those two teams where they're trying to kind of stay up at this tournament, try and get their new crop of players in. That's a success in their books there, to kind of keep up the national pride. The other big game that I have my eyes on is Sweden and the Czechs, the team that now that game really will end up probably deciding the top spot over in Group B, barring any kind of three-way tiebreakers. But especially with the overtime portion of the win today for the Czechs, now all of a sudden it becomes a lot less so of that three-way tie. So don't be surprised to see the Swedes kind of pull out the win in this one. And then from there, as much as, yes, the U.S. now needs to win against the Swedes to not be that third spot, it'll be a little bit more of that tough sled. But for the Czechs, we'll see if they can pull off a big win tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern time. That's 4 o'clock p.m. Central European time or local time for this tournament. And so that'll do it today for our scheduled content. We will now move over to viewer questions. We do put out a poll on our Twitter, X, and YouTube page at OnTheFly1515, asking for your thoughts and comments on the day. We'll start with a question from Nick, the IIHF fan, who says, for Czechia, USA, great job by the Czechs to end their lengthy losing streak against the US at this tournament. For Canada, Slovakia, if this was the World Juniors, I would be a lot angrier, harsher right now. However, these players are younger, and you can never underestimate a team playing motivated on home ice, so I'll hold back and give them the benefit of the doubt today. But play like that against Latvia tomorrow, and I will be a lot more critical. And that's fair, right? And I think as much as, yes, you can obviously not be as angry about this tournament rather than the World Juniors or the Men's World Championships, depending on which tournament you fancy, as well the Women's Worlds, Women's U18s, depending on how you kind of fancy the different levels. I do think that it is still a cause for concern, especially for a Canadian team that I don't want to say sucks, but it's just the same national program despite the age. And for me, that's the biggest cause for concern more than anything else, is that they haven't played well across the entire board. Yes, they're winning silver medals, which is great. But with Canada, and really with any Canadian team, every tournament you go into becomes gold or bust. And this Canadian team is about to get skunked at yet another Olympic or another IIHF year. They're going to need a big turnaround. I don't see it happening anytime soon, especially at this tournament where it is ever so much more disappointing. We'll see whether or not, of course, they're going to be able to find their way back in. But as of this current moment, especially going up against Latvia tomorrow, it's a put up or shut up kind of time, and we'll see if they're going to be able to pull through there. Then we'll go to the second comment from today from Xdoug, who says, Sweden's junior system looks really strong nowadays. Really strong prospects the last few years. Not that they have been bad before, but seems like they've stepped it up a notch. Medaling in every U18 gold, silver, and bronze World Juniors. They have the past 3 years made 2 finals. And that's exactly right. And I think you look at it for the Swedes, especially at this tournament, where they're now coming in, they're walking through the rest of this tournament now as favorites. I'm not going to make any argument there, especially after Canada's performance today. But when those games get important, we see a different kind of Swedish team come out. And so it's kind of the same argument that we made for the Canadians there about how, it's gold or bust. For the Swedes, it's somewhat similar. And I think as much as, yes, for the Swedish team, you would have liked to obviously kind of be that, kind of have that gold medal track record, it tends to be a bit of that kind of curse, if you will, where they continue to lose when those games get important. And so as much as, yes, they've got some medals, some of the lower colors over the last few years, their gold medal campaign at the World Juniors, in my eyes, has really helped to right the ship. We'll see whether this U18 tournament can continue that tradition, because once again, the Swedish team across really all levels, and you even think they're without their best player at this year's tournament, Viggo Bjork, it's going to be an interesting tournament for them. They have a really good roster. We'll see what happens when they go to the playoff rounds, whether or not they are going to end up choking like we've seen them do so many times. But still, for the Swedes, they have been developing really well. It's great to see, not just for the Swedish team in international hockey,
but also for the program in general. And then the last comment we will go to is from Osto Yematrix, who says, players to watch, ? And so I'd say for players to watch, we did a full all 10 team previews where we highlighted 7 players from each team at this tournament. So be sure to go check that out if you have not already. But as far as kind of what to expect, you know, you can kind of see up and down the board. There's the draft eligible players who I'd say you're looking at, a guy like Keaton Berhoff, who should have a big tournament this year, the chance to kind of earn his draft stock. Not a great start for him losing to the Slovaks on the opening day, but at the same time, we'll see whether or not he's going to be able to kind of pick up the pace. A guy this Canadian team is really going to rely upon up and down the roster. And as well, you can kind of look across the board for the Swedes. A guy who I think has a really good opportunity here is Axel Olofsson, who's a defenseman for the Swedish team. He's trying to earn his draft stock at this tournament, kind of a lower level, kind of that second, third round prospect as of this current moment. We've seen what he did at Hlinka Gretzky, a huge opportunity there for him to continue that success into this year's tournament. He's shown well, especially at the U18 level in the past. We'll see whether or not he's going to be able to continue that. But those are just some of the players I'd highly recommend you go check out the other videos we made on each specific team, where we highlight 7 players from each team to keep an eye on at this tournament. As well, you can also see the rest of the schedule, the key games, and then probably most of those videos see us talk about how Slovakia was going to lose to Canada in this game and probably the rest of this tournament. But with that, the joy of it is every day is a new day at this tournament. We'll see whether or not tomorrow's games are going to bring another upset. Latvia taking on Canada, always a game to keep an eye on as well. Huge relegation action with Denmark taking on Germany, the loser very likely sent down to the relegation game. And then lastly, the battle for the top spot in Group B, where we'll see Sweden taking on the Czechs. Be sure to come back tomorrow as we'll break it all down and more. But with that, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you realize you're subscribing, tell all your friends and comment down below your thoughts on day 1 of the Men's Under 18 Championships. Until next time, see you.